I'm going to read a quote to you, and as I read it, I want you to guess what nation this was said of and when.
How do I get it?
What happened here was the gradual habituation. Can we turn the lights down just a little bit so I can read the screen in the back? What happened here was the gradual habituation of the people, little by little, to being governed by surprise, to receiving decisions deliberated in secret, to believing that the situation was so complicated that the government had to act on information which the people could not understand, or so dangerous that even if the people could understand it, it could not be released because of national security. This separation of government from people, this widening of the gap took place so gradually, so insensibly, each step so disguised as a temporary emergency measure or associated with true patriotic allegiance or with real social purposes. And all the crises and reforms so occupied the people that they did not see the slow motion underneath of the whole process of government growing remoter and remoter. Now, while you're pondering and guessing what nation that was said of, let's consider a few things that are happening in America today. Anybody ever heard of the secret FISA courts, which were established in 1978 under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which have been operating in secret since 1978? In fact, did you know that their powers have expanded so much that they have been called almost a parallel Supreme Court? In fact, we're now getting revelations that they are contradicting the U.S. Supreme Court on matters of constitutional rights. That's how we got the revelations of FISA ordering Verizon to hand over all of its phone records of all of its customers. But now we learn it's not just Verizon. We learn now that the NSA is gathering data from Microsoft, Yahoo, Google, Facebook, Apple, Skype, YouTube, Dropbox soon to be included. In fact, did you know, this is not me saying anything from any ideological perspective or any partisan standpoint. Did you know that the stated mission statement of the NSA is to develop the ability to spy on anyone, anywhere, anytime? That is a direct quote. That is their mission statement. Now, if that's not enough, the Department of Homeland Security has now said that they have claimed the right to seize your laptop for any reason whatsoever based on nothing more than a hunch of any border agent, whether you're an American citizen or not. They can seize your laptop, they can hold it for an indefinite period of time, they can analyze all of your data, they can take it off of your laptop. Now, never mind what the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution says, that the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. They're not getting search warrants to take your laptop. This is happening in America today. Now, I wish more than anything that I could get every member of the NSA, every member of the Department of Homeland Security to read the Federalist Papers, because if they would understand that the Founding Fathers predicted their actions 225 years ago. Here's Alexander Hamilton from Federalist Paper number 8. Safety from external danger is the most powerful director of national conduct. Even the ardent love of liberty will, after a time, give way to its dictates. The violent destruction of life and property incident to war. The continual effort and alarm attendant on a state of continual danger will compel nations the most attached to liberty to resort for repose and security to institutions which have a tendency to destroy their civil and political rights. To be more safe, they at length become willing to run the risk of being less free. Benjamin Franklin, they who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Folks, this is America today. We are giving up our freedoms right and left in the name of safety and security. Now, please understand, this has nothing to do with left or right. This has nothing to do with conservative versus liberal. This has nothing to do with Democrat versus Republican. In case you're wondering, I'm an unaffiliated independent, and if you want to know what that means, read my book on common sense. What did I say? I said I'm an unaffiliated independent. Is that what I said? This has to do with being free and not free. This has to do with American and un-American. Nothing to do with partisanship. And we're not just seeing it in the NSA. The NSA, the Department of Homeland Security, all that stuff, that's a drop in the bucket. We see this very steep, very steady decline in America. We see it in the taxation. We see it in inflation, the hidden tax. We see it in regulation. In fact, constitutional scholar Oliver DeMille has said that we have lost on a very technical level, not ideological level, not any kind of opinion of conservative versus liberal, on a very technical level, we have already lost 16 of the freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution. So, what's the solution? What can ordinary citizens do about this steady decline of America, this loss of freedom? Well, to answer that question, let's go back to that quote. Have you guessed yet which nation this was said of? It was not said of America. It was said of Nazi Germany. This quote was taken from a book called They Thought They Were Free by Milton Meyer. Milton Meyer was a scholar after the war, wanted to really understand what happened in Germany. How did they lose their freedoms? Was the Holocaust really built into the fabric of the culture? What happened? So he went over to Germany, spent a couple years interviewing hundreds of regular German citizens. Not party officials, regular German citizens. What happened to your country here? And I want to read to you a couple sections from this book. And you tell me if you draw any connections to America today. What Gustav Schwenk wanted, and the only thing he wanted, was security. The job he wanted, and the only job he ever wanted, was a job with the state. Any job with the state, with its tenure, with its insurance, and its pension. Does that sound familiar to you today? Do we have a nation of employees in America today who are willing to let the government do whatever it wants? In fact, did you know there was an article published in, I think, New York Times that characterized, they did a poll of the American people to see how they felt about all these NSA data collection revelations. You know what the overwhelming opinion was? Spy on me. What do I have to hide? As long as they get theirs, right? As long as they get their job with their benefits and their security. Willie Hoffmeister, the old policeman, joined the party in 1937 because the new police chief said that all the men must join. When I asked him if he could have refused, he said this: "A millionaire, I was not." In other words, I didn't have the resources to care what was happening to my country. I needed a job. So I was willing to do whatever I needed to do to get a job, to get that security. A millionaire, I was not. So, I think a lot of people would say, are you crazy comparing America today to Nazi Germany? This is America. That can't happen here. Are you out of your mind? Anybody with a even superficial knowledge of history understands that every nation in history has lost its freedom. Without exception. Freedom is not free. Freedom must be earned. Freedom must be maintained. The challenge is this: we can only care about freedom to the extent that we can afford to. When we're employees in jobs looking for nothing but security and benefits and retirement, we don't think about freedom. We can't afford to fight about it even if we wanted to. Even the most passionate employees who are so passionate about the cause of liberty, what can they do about it? When something goes down over the weekend and we hear new revelations from the government, Monday morning, what do they have to do? Set their alarm and get up and go off to work. What can they do about it? This is why the solution is one thing. We get so caught up in the political battles. We think that the cause of liberty is about George Bush versus Al Gore. We think it's about Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama. What will fix this nation has nothing to do with politics. What we need in this nation to fix this nation is one thing. We need a revolution of entrepreneurship. See, it's not about Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama, and it's not about Republican versus Democrat. It's about the employee, consumer, security mindset versus the entrepreneur, producer, freedom mindset. That is the battleground for freedom. So it's not about voting in the right politician. What you're doing here right now today is far more important than anyone you will ever vote for in your lifetime. Entrepreneurship is the battle for freedom, and this is why I'm so passionate about Strongbrook. It has nothing to do with buying and selling real estate. It has nothing to do with making money. Those things are just means to a much bigger, much deeper end. What we're doing here is nothing short of saving our country. Saving our Constitution, saving our culture, saving our heritage, saving our freedom, one business owner, one investor at a time. What Strongbrook is about creating a new generation of producers, owners, entrepreneurs who think not in terms of security, but in terms of freedom. Not in terms of what's in it for me alone, but what's in it for future generations. Who think not in terms of victimhood, but in terms of being victors. Why was the founding generation so free? Was it because we had a handful of really smart men who crafted a constitution? That was part of it. But you know, backing those men was a whole generation, a whole culture of owners, entrepreneurs, producers. Did you know that in 1800, census information showed that over 90% of our population were owners of the means of production? They were farmers, merchants, shopkeepers, in other words, entrepreneurs. In 1900, that statistic was exactly the same. By 2000, that had exactly reversed. Less than 10% owners, 90% employees. Do you know that when they convened the Constitutional Convention of 1787, New Hampshire wanted to be involved, but you know why they couldn't? They couldn't send delegates. Why? Because the state didn't have any money. You know how they got delegates there? John Langdon, who was a wealthy merchant, stepped up to the plate and said, I'll pay for it, I'll pay my way, and I'll pay for another delegate. And John Langdon showed up to fight for his freedom because he was a wealthy merchant. He had the resources and the time to do that. What we need in America is not more double-speaking, patronizing politicians to rally behind. What we need is an army of John Langdons to rally behind, who the politicians will even rally behind because they have so much power and influence. We need an army of John Langdons who can afford to care about freedom. So why entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurs have the most to lose. What happened to the employee in Nazi Germany when they lost their freedom? Not much. What happens to the employee in America when we lose our freedom? Not much. Now, they still might, be subject to the effects of inflation and things of that nature, but they're still probably going to have a job. They might be getting their check from the government instead of a private corporation, but they're still going to have a job to show up to. Not so with entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs have a lot more to lose. They know what's at stake when they lose their freedom. Entrepreneurs think in terms of freedom, not in terms of security and benefit. See, it's not just what you do for a living, it's a mindset. Entrepreneurs understand just how far America has strayed from its roots because they're directly affected by the red tape, the taxation, the bureaucracy, the regulation. As an employee, you show up, you get your paycheck, you don't understand what the business owner is awake until 2 o'clock in the morning facing. You don't understand those battles that he fights with the state day in and day out. As an entrepreneur, and especially as a property owner, you get that, right? Entrepreneurship, ownership, self-reliance, self-determination is the essence of Americanism. That is our heritage, that is our culture, that is the bedrock of our freedom. Successful entrepreneurs can afford to fight for freedom. That's why entrepreneurship. Now, I'm guessing that this is not what you expected to hear when you showed up today. I'm guessing you're probably a little bit surprised by what I'm talking about. You came to hear about your Strongbrook business and nuts and bolts. This is what I want you to understand. In the process of building your Strongbrook business, you are impacting freedom. What you're doing to build your Strongbrook business matters, not just for your own personal security, not just for the fulfillment of your personal dreams, and those things are important, but it matters for the fabric of our culture and the perpetuation of our freedom. So when you pick up that phone and you're scared and you're nervous and your knees are shaking and you have butterflies in your stomach and you're worried about what people will think of you, I want you to pause and I want you to consider the millions of people who have fought, bled, sacrificed, suffered, died to give you that freedom to pick up that phone in the first place. Every discussion you have with your friends, every phone call you make, every PSA you sell, every grand opening you hold, every property that is purchased makes a dent in the cause of freedom. Whether you understand that or not, whether you care about that or not, you're making a difference. You're impacting future generations. Now, I want to finish by telling a story about a man by the name of Henry Brown. Henry Brown was born a slave on a Richmond, Virginia plantation. And when he saw his wife and 3 young children sold to another plantation, he said, "That's it, I've had enough, I'm getting out. If it kills me, I'm getting out." And so he thought about it for a while. He ended up having a carpenter build him a crate, a wooden box, 3 feet 1 inch wide by 3 feet 1 inch by 2.5 feet tall. Henry Brown was 5 foot 6 inches tall. He climbed into the box in the fetal position. They gave him 5 biscuits inside of the box. They nailed the box shut. They take it to the train depot. They had painted on the side of the box, this side up with care. But when he got to the train depot, his box was placed upside down. So he's in the fetal position in this box, upside down, blood rushing to his brain, can do nothing but wait and pray and wait to die. Well, thankfully, he gets turned right side up when he gets put on the train. But then when he gets transferred to a steamboat, he's placed upside down again. And again, prays and waits to die. Well, thankfully, some workers come by, turn his crate right side up so that they can sit on it and have their lunch. 24 hours after he had climbed into this crate, he arrives in Philadelphia. A group of abolitionists pick up the crate, take him to a private office, and behind closed and locked doors, fearing the worst, they rap on the box. Everything all right inside. And they hear Henry Brown's voice, "All right. Now listen, How bad do you want your freedom? Do you want it as bad as Henry Box Brown wanted it, by the way? That was his nickname that they called him for the rest of his life, that he wore as a badge of honor, Henry Box Brown. How bad do you want your freedom? Do you want it bad enough to conquer your fears? Do you want it bad enough to pick up that phone and make those phone calls? Because it matters. We so desperately need you to fight for your freedom. Because as you do so, as you fight for your freedom in your personal life, that's what will earn our freedom back as a nation. So tell me, how bad do you want it?